The desert kept its secrets under a thin skin of dusk. Heat rose from the earth like a breath that did not want to end. Crickets tuned their little violins. Far off, a thunderhead stacked itself over purple ridges, quiet and heavy. The wind moved slow across the chaparral and found the girl by the split-rail fence. Her name was Elara Ellison. She smelled like saddle soap and summer hay. She had a coil of rope at her hip and dust on her boots. Her father's ranch spread behind her. White oaks, a low barn of weathered boards, 2 bays chewing in their stalls. She touched the fence as if it were a hand she trusted. A lone rider came over the rise. Black hat, long coat that had seen rain and worse. He rode a blue roan with a scar at the shoulder. He kept his weight easy in the saddle. He did not hurry. The kind of man who knew that haste woke snakes. Elara felt him before she heard him, the way the air changed, the way quiet gathered and listened. He reined in 10 paces from the fence. The roan blew through its nose. He lifted his head, and the last of the light found his face. Not handsome, not gentle, something steadier. A jaw that could hold a secret forever. Eyes like river stone. He carried weariness like a second coat. He carried danger like a smell of gun oil. Elara's breath thinned. She did not step back. Her hand slid toward the gate latch, then stopped. The night seemed to wait on his first word. "I need water for the horse," he said. His voice had gravel and quiet. It settled into her like a weight that was not unwelcome. "Trough is by the barn," she said. Sun warmed but clean. He nodded once. He did not smile. He did not dismount. She saw the tied-down holster at his thigh. The leather was old. The grip was worn by a faithful hand. "You lost?" she asked. He looked past her to the low house with its porch lamp, to the line of cottonwoods that held a small sound of leaves together. He looked at the sky where a first star had found the courage to appear. "No," he said, "just not welcome in town." The words hung. The first coyote sang from the ravine. Elara felt a tug in her chest. Not fear, something that knew fear and would not let it rule. "You got a name, stranger." "Rafe," he said. Rafe Calder. Her lips tasted the name. She had heard it somewhere. In the saloon at Badger's Crossing, maybe. In a breath that carried whiskey and rumor. A wanted man. A man who had not killed for sport, they said, but had not been shy about it either. A man with trouble hung to him like burrs. She looked at the horse again. Its ears were soft and forward. A kind animal that trusted a hard man. That was the part that stayed with her. "You can water him," she said. "Then you ride on." Rafe swung down. The movement was smooth. He stood a head taller than the fence post. He walked the roan to the trough and let the reins drop. The horse drank with long throat sounds. Rafe set his hat on the rail. His hair was dark at the nape with sweat. A white line crossed one knuckle. It had not healed straight. Elara watched him. He did not look at her while the horse drank. That somehow was respectful, or careful. The difference felt small and important. "Where you coming from?" Rafe Calder. "South," he said. "Where you going?" "North." That drew a small smile from her. "You talk like a man who has learned the cost of truth." He glanced at her then. It was only a second, but it stirred the dust under her ribs. He did not study her face the way men in town did, starting at the mouth and staying too long. He looked at her eyes, met them, and did not take. "I talk like a man who wants to cross a county line before moonrise," he said. She felt the old ache rise, the one that had settled in her after Caleb Hart left with the spring cattle drive and failed to send a letter. A soft crack, old wood splitting in the quiet parts of her. Wounds make their own weather. Tonight hers made a storm that smelled like rain on iron. "There are easier trails," she said. He lifted his hat and set it back on. He did not answer. Hoofbeats came then, far and fast. Not one horse, many. The kind of sound that turns coyotes to silence. Rafe's head angled. The roan's ears went hard. "You bring company?" Elara asked. "Not the kind you invite in for coffee," he said. Deputy Silas Boone and his men came into view along the west fence. Dust jumped around their mounts. Their coats shone with that official dullness that grows on men who love the badge more than the work. Boone's moustache cut his mouth like a mean line. He raised a hand. The riders slowed. "Evening, Miss Ellison," Boone called. "You seen a man on a blue roan come through here?" Elara let the gate latch rest under her palm. She felt the rasp of iron. The porch lamp clicked and burned a little warmer. "What kind of man?" she asked. Boone smiled without showing teeth. "Wanted," he said. "Name of Rafe Calder. Took payroll off a stage last week. Shot a guard, maybe two." Rafe stood a breath behind her now. He had not moved, but he was nearer. The heat of him folded into the night air in a way she could feel along her skin. He did not speak. He did not reach for his gun. The quiet he wore grew larger, like a coat held open to hide a child in a storm. Elara looked at Boone. She saw a flicker there, not of law, of hunger. Men like Boone loved the chase more than the truth. She had learned that watching her father haggle for calves with him at market, he always came away with more than he paid for. "I have not seen a man like that," she said. Boone studied her. The riders shifted, impatient. A horse tossed its head. Metal clicked. The thunderhead pressed closer. It promised no rain. Only light that would break itself and vanish. "You would tell me if you had," Boone said. "If I had, I would not need to tell you," she said. "You would already have him in irons." A rider snorted a laugh and swallowed it when Boone turned his head. He touched the brim of his hat toward Elara, but the motion had the cut of a threat. "You be careful, Miss Ellison," he said. "There are men out here who would take what is not theirs." He led the riders on. They faded down the fence line and out beyond the cottonwoods. Dust rose and fell behind them like the last breath of a bad idea. Elara kept her hand on the latch. Her pulse was a drum the size of a palm. She did not look back at Rafe. She looked at the trough where the roan had left a small circle of spilled water darkening the dirt. She watched it fade. She listened to the silence return, slow and relieved. "Why," she said softly, "did I just lie for you?" He did not answer at once. When he did, his voice was lower. "Maybe you heard something your heart believed," he said. "Maybe you liked the way I let the horse drink first." She turned then. The stars had burrowed into the dark. The first lightning walked a white thread across the far ridge. It did not find ground. "You shot a guard," she said. He shook his head. "Not mine, not how it got told." Truth wandered off, and no one fetched it home. She took a step toward him. She did not mean to. She felt heat pass between them, like hands warmed by the same fire. It stacked inside her with old need and something gentler. She saw how tired he was. She saw how his tiredness did not make him cruel. That mattered. It mattered more than it should have. "You cannot stay," she said. "I know." But then she whispered, almost to herself, "There is a canyon north of here. Willow Spring. Water holds in a basalt bowl. If a man kept to the dark side of the wash, he could pass without leaving sign." His eyes found hers again. Quiet settled like a blanket on a restless child. "Thank you, Elara Ellison." She felt the sound of her name in his mouth. It rang like a small bell, pure and sad. The wind lifted the edge of his coat. The porch lamp hummed and held. He took the roan's reins and stepped back into the night that had been waiting for him. She felt the pull as he went. It surprised her how deep it was. It surprised her how safe it felt to watch him vanish. The thunder walked again. Her breath followed it. She looked at the spill of water by the trough. It had almost gone dry. If the night left a mark, it would be the shape of a hand not taken yet. Stay close. If this has warmed a quiet place in you, let your presence be known, so the fire will be ready for what comes next. The night did not end for Elara. It stretched thin and restless, stitched by the sound of coyotes and her own thoughts. The moon rose slow and red, watching the ranch like an old judge. Every door creaked too loud, every shadow looked back. She sat by the window in her small room above the porch. Her father's rifle leaned against the wall, clean, oiled, untouched. The old man himself slept 2 rooms away, his breath heavy with whiskey and age. He'd never have known she'd lied to the law, but she knew. Her fingers kept finding the empty space where her mother's locket should have been. She'd taken it off earlier that evening, just before the stranger came riding through the twilight. That felt like another lifetime now. The kind of moment a woman could spend the rest of her days trying to explain, even to herself. Down by the trough, the earth had already swallowed the spill of water. Rafe Calder had vanished like a mirage, and yet his presence hung in the air. It was in the horse's uneasy shifting. It was in the way the night refused to settle. Elara whispered his name once, just to see how it sounded in the dark. It stayed in her mouth, warm and dangerous. By morning, the ranch was all business again. Chickens squawked, hooves clattered, the smell of dust and feed rose with the sun. But the calm felt thin, stretched over something deep and wrong. Her father, Elara Ellison, came stomping in from the barn, sweat already darkening his collar. "You seen the lawmen last night?" he asked. She nodded, trying to sound careless. "They were looking for a man." "Rafe Calder," he spat the name. "Stage thief. Murderer." She kept her eyes low. "They say he killed for money." "For pride, maybe," her father said. "Men like that got no use for reasons." He poured coffee into a tin cup, black and bitter, then glanced toward her window. "You best stay clear of him if he's still around." Elara forced a smile. "I don't go looking for trouble, Pa." Harlan grunted. "Trouble don't care what you're looking for." He left again, leaving his warning behind like a trail of dust. By noon, the air trembled with heat. Elara took the water wagon out toward the north pasture. A hawk wheeled overhead, and the wind carried the faintest smell of rain. a lie the desert told often. She pulled the mules to a stop by the canyon rim. Willow Spring lay below, a dark scar through the gold earth, its walls cut by time and silence. She climbed down, her boots kicking grit over the edge. Somewhere down there, water moved slow through black stone, and somewhere down there, a man might be waiting. Her heart betrayed her. One hard, wild thump that made her breath catch. She told herself she was checking the spring for the herd, that she was being cautious. But deep down, she knew the truth wasn't that clean. A horse snorted from the shade. The sound was quiet, but her pulse answered it like a drum. He stepped out from behind the rocks, his coat now streaked with dust. His eyes were darker in the light, grey turned near black. The revolver was gone from his hand, but the danger wasn't. He moved like a man who'd been hunted all his life and learned to dance with it. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice steady but soft. Rafe tilted his head, studying her. "And yet you came." "For the herd," she said quickly. "They drink here sometimes." He looked past her shoulder to the horizon, empty as a lie. "Then you'll find them thirsty." Silence wrapped around them. The wind brushed her hair across her face. He watched her, not with hunger, but something heavier, a kind of recognition. "Why'd you lie for me last night?" he asked. "I don't rightly know," she said. "Maybe I don't like Deputy Boone's kind of justice." Rafe gave a short, quiet laugh, the first she'd heard from him. "You got a bold streak for a rancher's daughter." She met his gaze. "You got a death wish for a wanted man." He stepped closer, then, not enough to touch, but near enough for her to feel the warmth that lived beneath the dust. "I didn't kill that guard," he said, "but I ran. Makes no difference to men like Boone." "It does to me," she whispered. For a moment, something unspoken stood between them, like two hands almost meeting through smoke. Then a sound tore the stillness, the cry of a hawk, sharp and sudden. Rafe looked up, his jaw tightening. "They're close again," he said. "Boone won't quit until he's got a body to show." Elara glanced toward the ridge. A line of dust was moving fast. "How many?" she asked. "Enough," he said. The mules shifted nervously. She grabbed the reins. "You can't stay here." "No," Rafe said, eyes already on the east. "But they'll cut the valley before I'm halfway clear." Elara's heart kicked hard again. Logic screamed to let him go, to ride back home, to pretend she never saw those grey eyes, never felt this pull that had no reason. Instead, she tossed him her father's old saddlebag from the wagon. "There's jerky and cartridges. Take it." Rafe caught it easily. "You're gambling a lot on a man you don't know." "I know you didn't reach for your gun last night," she said. "That's enough for now." The wind shifted, bringing the echo of hoofbeats closer. He swung into the saddle with a fluid motion, the roan eager beneath him. He looked down at her once more. "If I ride clear, they'll come asking again." "Then I'll lie better next time," she said. For a heartbeat his eyes softened, something fierce and grateful flickering through the dust. Then he turned the horse toward the canyons and was gone again, swallowed by stone and sun. Elara stood alone on the rim, breath shallow, heart loud. Somewhere below, the hawk cried again, a warning, or maybe a promise. She didn't know yet which. But when the dust on the horizon broke into riders' shapes, she knew her choice had already been made. The desert had taken her secret, and now it wanted more. Stay close, traveller. The night's not done, and the fire still waits to show what happens when danger and desire share the same breath. The law came before the sun fell. Dust first. Then the glint of badges. By the time the riders reached the ranch, the air already tasted like fear and iron. Deputy Boone dismounted slow, the way a man does when he wants to be watched. His boots hit the dirt, heavy. Behind him, two men spread out, rifles loose in their hands. They weren't looking for water, they were looking for a man. Elara stood by the porch steps, her braid pulled low, her jaw set. Her father came out behind her, wiping grease from his hands. "Deputy," Harlan said, his tone halfway between respect and warning. "You bringing trouble or looking for it?" Boone tipped his hat, smile thin as a blade. "Depends on whether you've seen a certain someone." He drew out the name like a slow cut. "Rafe Calder." Elara kept her face still. The name slid through her like a live wire. Harlan spat into the dust. "Ain't seen him. Heard he's the sort rides alone." Boone's eyes flicked to Elara. "Funny thing about men who ride alone. They always seem to find company when they shouldn't." She met his stare, calm, level. "I tend to my stock, Deputy. If a man passed by, I didn't notice." Boone circled once, slow as a coyote, boots grinding gravel. "You sure, Miss Ellison? Some folks might say it's a sin to lie for a killer." She held his gaze. "Some folks might say it's a sin to call someone killer without proof." The silence that followed had weight. One of the deputies laughed under his breath until Boone's look shut him up. He tugged his gloves, leather creaking. "You've got a sharp tongue. Be careful where you point it." Harlan stepped forward. "That's enough, Boone." But Boone wasn't done. He looked past them to the barn, to the field beyond, where the tracks of a single horse curved into open land. "Tracks," he said. "Fresh. Headed north." He turned back to Elara. "You didn't notice those either?" Elara's heart thumped once, hard. "The herd scatters that way sometimes," she said. "Must be one of ours." Boone stared a long moment, then smiled, a kind of smile that made her skin crawl. "Well, if your herd starts shooting back, I'll know where to start asking questions." He swung into his saddle and signaled his men. "We'll be riding north. If Calder's smart, he'll already be dead or gone." He paused, eyes on her once more. "If he circles back, you let me know, or maybe you won't get the chance." They rode out in a cloud of red dust. The sound of hooves faded slow, like thunder leaving the valley. Harlan cursed under his breath. "Damn fools think they're the law of God." He looked at her. "You sure you ain't seen him, girl?" She met his eyes and lied without a blink. "I'm sure." He studied her for a heartbeat longer, then nodded. "Good. Best keep it that way." When he walked back inside, she stood there a long time, watching the dust trail fade. The lie burned in her chest. Not like guilt, like firelight. Dangerous, alive, refusing to go out. That night the wind came cold off the canyon. The house creaked and the lamp on her desk flickered with every gust. Elara sat with her journal open, staring at the page but not writing. She could still see him. Rafe Calder. The way his voice lingered like whiskey left too long in a glass. The way he looked at her, not as a rancher's daughter, not as a woman to be won or saved, but as if he'd already known her before the desert gave them names. She closed her eyes. The memory came back too clearly. His hand on the reins, the tremor in his breath when she lied for him, the silent question between them. Outside, the horses stirred. A board creaked on the porch. Then came a sound she did not expect, the faint rhythm of boots. She froze, heart leaping. The sound stopped just beneath her window. "Rafe," she whispered before she could stop herself. The whisper was stolen by wind, but the shadow didn't move. Then came his voice, quiet, rough as gravel. "They're riding farther north than I thought." Her breath caught. She went to the window. His face was half hidden under the brim of his hat, moonlight cutting across his jaw. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. He looked up at her, eyes unreadable. "Couldn't let you take the heat alone. Boone's not the forgiving kind." "And you are?" she asked softly. He almost smiled. "No, but I owe you truth." He held out something small in his hand, her mother's locket. She gasped. "How?" "Found it near the trough. Figured you'd want it back." Her fingers trembled when she reached through the window. Their hands brushed, just a whisper of skin, but enough to light every nerve she owned. "You could have left it," she said. "I could have," he answered, "but then I wouldn't have seen you again." The words sank deep, quiet and dangerous. She looked at him, at the man wanted by law, hunted by night, standing there like a storm pretending to be a man. "You should go," she said, voice softer now. He nodded. "I will, after I tell you something." "What?" "They say I stole money. I didn't, but I did take something that wasn't mine." Her throat tightened. "And what was that?" His gaze lifted, steady and slow. "Peace." The silence broke like glass. She didn't move, neither did he. Then, from far off, a gun cracked, one, then two. He turned his head toward the sound. "Boone's close." Elara felt her chest tighten. "They'll find your tracks this time." "Maybe," he said. "Unless you know a way out of this valley, I don't." She hesitated, torn between fear and the wild pull that had taken root in her since that first night. "There's a dry wash behind the barn," she said. "It runs east to the arroyo. You can follow it under the ridge." He looked at her, the faintest glint of warmth in his eyes. "You got a dangerous heart, Elara Ellison. Then you'd better ride before it gets you shot," she said. He gave a short nod. "When this is over, if I live through it, I'll come back." "Don't make promises you can't keep," she whispered. He turned away, his coat catching the moonlight. "Wasn't a promise," he said. "Just truth." He mounted the roan and vanished once more into the night. Elara stood at the window, fingers tight around the locket he'd returned. Outside, thunder rolled over the ridge like a warning. But in her heart, something else stirred, something that didn't sound like fear anymore. If the wind carries his name tonight, I'll know he's still running. And maybe, somehow, I'm running too. Stay near the fire, listener. The chase has only just begun, and the desert keeps its debts in blood and longing. By dawn, the sky had turned the color of bruised violets. The storm that had threatened all night finally came, sweeping across the plains in ragged waves. Rain fell hard enough to blur the line between earth and sky, washing the dust from every stone, and perhaps from every lie Elara had told. She stood under the porch roof, the locket clutched in her palm. Her father was still asleep, a half-empty bottle on the table beside him. She could hear the storm working against the barn, wind in the eaves, horses stamping restlessly, doors creaking like old memories trying to get out. She didn't see Rafe that morning, but she felt him. Every gust carried his echo, the soft rasp of his voice, the way his eyes had held hers with something unspoken, not desire, not safety, but something that trembled between the two. She told herself she wasn't waiting. She told herself she was only listening for trouble. But the heart doesn't take orders, not from reason, not from fear, and never from a man's absence. By noon, Boone returned. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the mud clung thick to his boots. He came without his men this time, alone and damp, a look on his face that didn't belong to a lawman anymore. It belonged to a man who had decided something cruel and final. "Elara," he said, tipping his hat but not his tone. "Your father home?" "Resting," she said. "He's got no patience for storms." Boone stepped up onto the porch. His eyes swept the yard, the puddles, the scattered feed buckets, the fresh wheel ruts near the barn. He noticed everything. "You've been busy," he said. "Ranch doesn't run itself." "No," he agreed, "but it don't usually hide thieves either." Her jaw tightened. "You're running out of things to accuse me of, Deputy." Boone smiled without warmth. "Not yet. We found a campsite out near Willow Spring. Small fire, fresh boot prints. You wouldn't happen to know who might have used it." She kept her face calm. "Trappers sometimes camped near there. These prints weren't from trappers. They were from a man with a limp in his left step." "You know who walks like that?" Her throat went dry. Rafe's left leg, the way he favoured it after long rides. She'd noticed. She wished she hadn't. "I wouldn't know," she said quietly. Boone's eyes narrowed. "Funny thing. You lie like you were born for it." Something in her snapped. "You accuse a lot of folks, Deputy. Maybe that's why no one calls you a hero." Boone's hand shot out faster than she expected, catching her wrist before she could step back. His grip was strong, too strong. "I'm the only man keeping this county from turning into hell," he hissed. "Don't mistake mercy for weakness." Elara didn't flinch. She met his stare dead on. "Then maybe hell's already here." A voice cut through the rain. "Let her go." Boone turned. Rafe stood 10 paces away, hat low, revolver drawn. The storm had soaked him through, his coat hanging heavy, but his stance was steady as stone. "Calder," Boone said, his tone a knife. "You should have kept running." "Maybe," Rafe said, eyes fixed on Boone's hand still gripping Elara. "But a man's got to finish what he starts." Boone's mouth twitched. "You aiming to add murder to your list?" "Not if you walk away," Rafe said. The silence that followed was thunder made human. Even the rain seemed to pause. Boone let go of Elara's wrist slowly. Then, with deliberate calm, he brushed the mud from his sleeve. "You just made her an accomplice, Calder. You think I'll forget that?" Rafe's eyes didn't waver. "You won't live long enough to remember it." Boone's hand twitched toward his holster. Rafe fired first. The gunshot cracked like a whip in the rain. Boone staggered back, clutching his shoulder. The smell of powder mixed with wet earth. The horses screamed from the barn. Rafe moved fast, grabbed Elara's hand, pulled her toward the stables. "They'll come when they hear that shot," he said. "You just shot the law," she breathed. "He wasn't the law," Rafe said. "He was a storm wearing a badge." They burst into the barn. The roans stamped, ready. Elara's father shouted from the house, his voice tangled with confusion and fear. "Rafe, what are you doing?" she gasped. "Keeping you alive," he said. He swung her up onto the saddle before she could argue. Then he climbed behind her, one arm steady around her waist. The closeness was dizzying, his breath warm against her ear, his heartbeat a steady drum against her back. "You'll be wanted now," she said. "So will you." Her pulse raced. "Then ride." He kicked the roan hard. The barn doors blew open with the wind, and they plunged into the open world, rain slashing across their faces, hooves pounding the soaked earth. Behind them, Boone shouted curses. Another gunshot split the air, but the desert was wide, and the storm was on their side. They rode until the world blurred into motion, water, wind, and heat of two hearts that shouldn't have found each other. When they finally slowed, the rain had eased to a whisper. They stopped beneath a sandstone arch carved by centuries of wind. The roan trembled, foam streaking its chest. Rafe slid down first, then helped her dismount. For a moment, they stood facing each other, breathing hard, the storm still in their blood. "You didn't have to come," she said. He shook his head. "You didn't have to lie." Their eyes met. Something raw passed between them, a kind of truth that didn't need words. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "You saved me first." The sky began to clear. A slice of sun broke through, catching the water on her hair. It shone like firelight. For the first time, Rafe smiled, not with amusement, but with something like peace. "Looks like we're both outlaws now," he said. Elara felt her lips tremble. "Then we best learn how to run together." The wind carried the scent of rain and promise. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled again, but softer this time, like applause for two hearts, reckless enough to ride against the storm. And beneath that sound, the first spark of something new began to burn. Stay with the trail. The storm has only washed the dust from what comes next, and under the western sky, every heartbeat writes its own law. They rode north until the storm fell behind them, until even the thunder forgot their names. The land turned quiet again, open, endless, gold under a sky scraped clean by rain. The roan's hooves found their rhythm against the hard earth. Every sound seemed sharper now. The soft jangle of tack, the hush of wind through sage, the shared breath between two fugitives who had yet to call themselves that. When Elara finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. "Where are we going?" Rafe didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the horizon where a thin blue shadow marked distant hills. "Out past Dry Mesa," he said. "There's a cabin, old trapper's place. I used it once when I worked freight. No one goes there now." She looked over her shoulder at him. His jaw was set, the muscles moving like he was chewing silence instead of words. "They'll track us," she said. "Maybe," he replied. "But the rain bought us a few hours. That's all a man like me ever gets." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet creosote and burned powder. She could almost taste the fear she should have felt, but it was tangled with something else, something warmer. It wasn't safe, but it felt alive. They reached the mesa by late afternoon. The air there carried a dry chill that bit at their skin. The cabin stood alone against the cliffs, tilted, old, but still holding its shape. Rafe dismounted first, scanning the land before offering his hand. "Careful," he said. The steps weak. She slid down, her boots touching ground beside his. Their hands brushed again, that same quiet spark that always seemed to find them. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and dust. Light slipped through a hole in the roof, painting the room in gold streaks. A rusted stove leaned in one corner. A narrow bed sat under a window. The silence there was deep, almost holy. Rafe unstrapped his gun belt and hung it on a nail. "We'll rest here till dark, then I'll ride out, draw 'em off." She turned on him, voice rising. "And leave me here?" He met her gaze. "It's the only way." "No," she said. "You think you're doing me a kindness, but you're just running again." That hit him harder than any bullet could. He took a slow breath. "I run 'cause people die around me, Elara. Maybe they die because you stop running from the wrong things." He stared at her then, really stared, as if seeing her for the first time. The air between them thickened, full of things neither dared to name. The rainlight caught her face, soft and fierce, all at once. He stepped closer. "You don't know what I've done." "Then tell me," she whispered. He hesitated. For a man used to silence, truth felt heavier than iron. "I was guard in that stage," he said finally. "The one they say I robbed. Boone was the one who planned it. He tipped the gang where we'd be. I tried to stop 'em. They killed the driver, shot me when I went for him." Her breath caught. "Boone set you up?" "Yeah, but the law only needs a story that fits." Elara sank onto the edge of the bed, eyes wide. "So, you've been running ever since?" He nodded. "Till you—" The words hung there, simple and devastating. Outside, the sun slipped lower, turning the desert red and gold. Inside, the light fell over his face, softening the lines carved by years of dust and guilt. She stood slowly, stepped closer until the distance between them was no wider than a breath. "You could still clear your name," she said. "Maybe," he murmured, "but I don't care much for the man I was before I met you." The sound of her heartbeat filled the quiet. He reached out, hesitant, almost reverent, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers trembled. The touch was light, but it carried weight, memory, promise. "I don't know what this is," she said. "It's what's left when everything else burns," he answered. The fire they'd built for warmth cracked softly, throwing sparks against the stove's mouth. The air between them felt like it could ignite from a single breath, too close. But then, from far beyond the cliffs, came the faint echo of hooves. Rafe's hand fell away. "They found us," he said. Elara turned toward the window. Dust rose in the distance, moving fast. "How?" "Boone knows this land." "He knows me." Rafe grabbed his gun belt, slung it across his hips. "You'll ride the roan. Head south. There's a wash that'll take you out clean." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." "Elara?" "No!" She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "You think I can just go back and wait for them to hang you?" He caught her by the shoulders, firm but gentle. "You got a life worth keeping." "So do you," she said. "Let me fight beside you." Something inside him cracked, the hard thing he'd built to keep the world out. He looked at her, the stubborn light in her eyes, the wild defiance that matched the storm in his chest. God help me, he whispered. I believe you mean that. I do. The sound of hooves grew louder, the earth trembling beneath it. Rafe reached for the rifle near the door, checked the chamber. Then we hold 'em off together. Elara nodded. Together. She took her father's revolver from her saddlebag and spun the cylinder, her hands surprisingly steady. The firelight painted her face in shades of courage and fear. He looked at her one last time. Whatever happens, you don't stop fighting. She met his eyes. Not unless you do first. The first rider came into view, a dark blur against the dying sun. Boone's men, rifles raised, closing fast. Rafe took position by the window. Elara crouched near the door. The storm that had chased them had found them again, only this time it carried gunfire instead of rain. Rafe's voice dropped low, almost tender. When this starts, keep your head down, and if you hear me say, run, run. She swallowed. And if I don't? He almost smiled. Then God help us both. The rifles cracked. The glass shattered. Dust and fire met the twilight, and in that wild moment between fear and fate, she reached for his hand and found it waiting. Stay close to the fire, listener. The bullets haven't found their mark yet, but hearts rarely miss in the West. Gunfire split the quiet open like lightning. The first bullet shattered the window. The second buried itself in the wall behind Elara's head. Splinters flew. Dust filled the air thick enough to choke on. Rafe pulled her down behind the overturned table. "Stay low," he hissed. The smell of gunpowder burned her throat. Every sound came sharp. The crack of rifles, the thud of boots outside, the short gasps of the roan tethered nearby. He fired twice through the window. One rider screamed, another cursed. Then silence for half a heartbeat, the kind that feels like a held breath before the storm breaks again. Elara's hands trembled around her revolver. "They'll circle the back," she said. He nodded. "I know." He shifted to the doorway, eyes hard and calm. Rain began again, soft at first, turning the dirt into slick mud. The storm had returned like an ally too late to save anyone, but just in time to cover the sound of fear. When the next wave of shots came, Rafe stepped out and fired back, steady, deliberate. His body moved with the certainty of a man who'd long made peace with dying if it meant buying someone else a little more time. Elara pressed her back against the wall, heart hammering. A rider burst through the back window, boots first, a knife flashing in his fist. She turned before she thought and fired once. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The man dropped without a sound, falling halfway through the frame. Her breath hitched. Her hands shook. Rafe turned at the sound, saw what she'd done, and in that instant, between bullets, something fierce and proud lit his eyes. "You're still with me," he said. She nodded. "You said not to stop fighting." They held the cabin through the worst of it. Every shot was a heartbeat, every pause a prayer. The storm raged louder, washing gunfire into thunder. Then, suddenly, there was quiet again. Only the rain whispering against the roof. Rafe's breath came rough. He glanced out the window, pistol ready. "Boone's still out there," he said. "He don't quit easy." Elara wiped sweat and mud from her face. "Neither do I." He gave a faint, weary smile. That's what scares me. A shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. Boone's voice followed, low, measured, soaked with hate. You can't hide forever, Calder. You think that girl's gonna save you. She'll hang for your sins just the same. Rafe tensed, his jaw locking. Elara put a hand on his arm. He wants you angry. He's getting there. Then don't give him what he came for, she said softly. For a long moment, only the rain answered. Then Boone's voice came again, closer now. You shoot me, boy, and every lawman from here to Carson will come down on her head. You think you can protect her from that? Rafe stepped forward, not out of the cabin yet, but close. His voice, when it came, was low, dangerous. I ain't protecting her, Boone. She's the one protecting me. Elara's heart clenched. Boone laughed, the sound rough and cruel. You always were a fool for saving lost causes. The door burst open. Boone was there, rifle in hand, eyes wild with stormlight. Rafe fired first. The shot struck Boone's gun, sent it spinning, but Boone charged anyway, slamming into him. The two men crashed against the table, the struggle raw, wordless, desperate. Elara's revolver shook in her hands. She couldn't get a clean aim. They were too close, tangled in fury and rain. "Rafe!" she cried. Boone threw a punch. Rafe caught his wrist, forced him down. The knife in Boone's belt flashed. He reached for it, but Elara moved faster. She stepped forward, pressed the barrel to Boone's temple. "Enough!" she said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. It was steadier, older. Boone froze. His eyes flicked toward her, full of hate and disbelief. "You'll never make it out alive," he spat. She met his stare. "Maybe not. But I'll make sure you don't either." Rafe took the knife from Boone's belt and tossed it aside. "Let him go," he said quietly. Her eyes widened. "What?" "Let him ride. Word'll spread faster if he dies here." Boone scowled. "You think Mercy's gonna change a damn thing?" Rafe straightened, the gun still steady in his hand. "No, but maybe it'll change me." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Boone backed toward the door, clutching his bleeding arm. "You're both finished," he said. "When they find me, I'll tell 'em she helped you. They'll hang her first." Elara didn't flinch. "Then you better start riding fast," she said. He vanished into the rain, swallowed by the storm that had carried him here. The silence that followed was too big for words. Rafe sank down against the wall, shoulders heavy. Blood darkened his sleeve. "You're hit," she said, rushing to him. He shook his head. "Just a graze." "Lie," she whispered. "You bleed like a man who's lost too much already." He smiled faintly, eyes half closed. "You talk like a woman who's found something worth keeping." She tore a strip from her skirt, pressed it against the wound. Her hands were firm but gentle. His breath hitched once, not from pain, but from the nearness of her. The storm outside began to fade. She met his gaze, saw everything there. The fear, the ache, the gratitude, the longing. Neither dared to speak. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his voice a whisper. "If I make it through tonight, I'll tell you what my heart's been trying to say since the first time you lied for me." She smiled through tears. "Then you best make it through." The fire burned low, the rain softening to mist. They sat there in the half-dark, two fugitives bound not by law or fate, but by the quiet promise that had begun the moment their eyes first met across a fence line. Outside, the desert breathed again, slow, forgiving, and waiting. Stay close to the flame, listener. The night has spared them for now, but dawn in the west always comes with a reckoning. The fire had burned down to quiet embers. The storm was gone, leaving only the faint scent of rain and smoke in the cabin. Elara sat by Rafe's side, watching the rise and fall of his chest. He slept rough, half on the floor, half against the wall, his arm bandaged, his jaw slack with exhaustion. She wanted to let him rest, but dawn was coming, and dawn had a way of breaking everything open. Outside, the desert shimmered with that strange kind of stillness that only follows gunfire. No birds, no wind, just the hum of a world holding its breath after violence. Elara stood, stepped to the doorway, and looked out. The horizon stretched wide and pale, the color of unspoken things. For the first time she realized what it meant to have no home to go back to. She wasn't a rancher's daughter anymore. She was the woman who rode with a wanted man. Behind her, Rafe stirred. "You're up early." She turned. He was watching her, eyes clear now, though tired. "I couldn't sleep." "Dreams or truth keeping you awake?" he asked. She gave a faint smile. "Truth's louder." He tried to rise, wincing. She moved quickly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Don't," she said. "You'll tear the stitches." He looked at her hand, small, steady, warm against his skin. "You fix me up, then tell me not to move. You're a hard woman to please." She smiled. "I learned from a hard man." That drew a low chuckle from him, short, but real. He looked at her a long time, like he was memorizing the shape of her face against the light. "You know Boone won't stop," he said. "By sundown, he'll have men on every ridge between here and the border." She nodded. "Then we'll ride before the sun's high." He frowned. "We? You think I'm letting you ride off half-dead into a desert that hates you more than Boone does?" "Elara." "No," she said softly but firm. "You started this by saving me. Now I'm seeing it through." He sighed, the kind of sigh that carried both gratitude and fear. "You don't owe me nothing." She met his gaze. "Maybe not, but I owe myself the truth. And the truth is, I don't want to lose you." The words fell heavy in the air. For a heartbeat he didn't move. Then he reached out, his rough hand brushing her cheek. His thumb traced a line there, slow and trembling, as if afraid she'd vanish if he touched too hard. "I've spent my life running from ghosts," he said. "Didn't figure I'd find an angel waiting in the dust." She gave a broken laugh. "I ain't no angel." "No," he murmured. "You're better. You're real." Their eyes met, and the world seemed to go quiet again. The air between them thickened, charged. She felt his breath, warm, uneven, carrying words he hadn't yet said. He leaned closer, stopped just shy of her lips. "You sure you want this life, Elara? The road don't offer much, but miles and regret." She didn't step back. "Maybe regret's worth it, if the miles are with you." He closed the space then. The kiss was slow, aching, and deep, less fire than gravity. It pulled them both into something too vast to name, too fragile to explain. When they broke apart, neither spoke. Their foreheads rested together, breaths mingling like a shared secret. Outside, the light had turned gold. The first warmth of morning reached the edge of the doorway, brushing the floorboards. He stood, slower this time, adjusting his coat and holster. "We ride east," he said. "Canyon trail'll hide us till dark." She nodded, cheeks still flushed. "And then?" "Then we keep ridin'." They saddled the roan, the air already warming. The land around them stretched wide and raw, a beauty that didn't forgive, but sometimes forgot. As they rode, the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything they hadn't said, everything they finally could. By midday, they reached a narrow gorge cut deep into the red stone. The air smelled of iron and sage. Rafe dismounted, scanning the ridges. "We'll rest here. Boone's men won't risk this pass till night." Elara slid down, her legs trembling slightly from the long ride. "You always pick the prettiest places to hide," she said. He smiled faintly. "A man learns to notice beauty when he spends most of his life losing it." They unpacked a small fire, enough for warmth but not smoke. She cooked what little jerky they had left. He watched her hands move, the small grace in each motion. "You ever think about going back?" he asked quietly. "To the ranch? To anything before this?" She stirred the embers with a stick. "Sometimes. But then I remember how it felt. The same every day, like waiting for someone to notice I was alive. Then you rode in, and everything started moving again." He nodded slowly. "You make a man wish he'd taken a different road." "You still can," she said. He looked out at the canyon. "No, my road only goes one way." The quiet that followed wasn't sad. It was tender, like two travelers sharing the same wound. When the sun dipped low, painting the rocks blood red, she leaned back against him. His arm slid around her waist, instinctive and sure. The warmth of him was a kind of truth the world could never outlaw. For a while, there was no sound but the wind and their breathing. Then he spoke, voice rough and soft all at once. "I used to think love was something a man couldn't afford. Not out here. Too dangerous. Too fragile." "And now?" she asked. He brushed his thumb along her wrist. "Now, I think it's the only thing that ever made the danger worth it." The canyon wind moved like music through the stones. She turned her head slightly, enough to meet his gaze. "Then maybe we stop running from it." He smiled, that slow, worn smile she'd already learned to trust. "Maybe we do." But before the words could settle, a hawk cried overhead, sharp, sudden. Rafe stiffened, eyes scanning the ridgeline. "Boone," he said under his breath. Elara followed his gaze. Up on the ridge, sunlight flashed against a rifle barrel. Then came the distant echo of a shot. The bullet hit rock inches from their fire, spraying dust and stone. "Down!" Rafe shouted, pulling her close as another round whined past. The canyon walls came alive with echoes, gunfire bouncing between them, turning one rifle into many. Rafe grabbed the reins, his voice low but fierce. "We're moving! Now!" She swung up behind him as the roan reared. They rode hard into the deep shadow of the gorge, the world collapsing into motion and noise. The sun vanished behind stone. The air turned cold again. Rafe looked over his shoulder, jaw clenched. "Boone's got 100 miles of hate in him, and he ain't done yet." Elara tightened her arms around him. "Then he'll have to ride through me first." The canyons swallowed their words, carrying them forward into a darkness that promised both danger and deliverance. Stay near the firelight, listener. The desert is closing in, but love has a way of finding its own trail through the dark. Night fell fast in the canyon. The air turned cold enough to bite, and every shadow seemed alive. The moon hadn't yet risen, but its light waited behind the ridge, silver and patient. Rafe slowed the roan near a narrow bend, where the rock walls leaned close together. "We'll camp here," he said, voice low. "Boone won't risk shooting blind in the dark." Elara slid down first, boots crunching against loose stone. Her legs trembled from the ride, but she forced them steady. Rafe tied the roan beneath a crooked cedar, then checked his rifle again. His movements were automatic, cautious, quiet, weary. "Oh, you've done this before," she said softly. He looked up. "You mean running for my life?" She smiled faintly. "No, protecting someone else's." That caught him. For a moment, his guard slipped, and the man beneath the outlaw's coat showed, a man who had spent too long fighting ghosts no one else could see. "Sometimes protecting means losing," he said. "Sometimes it's all you can do." Elara knelt by the fire pit and struck flint until the spark caught. The small flame flickered, fragile against the wind. "Maybe," she said, "but not tonight." They ate in silence. Jerky, a scrap of bread, and the last of the water from the canteen. When the food was gone, only the sound of the fire filled the space between them. Rafe leaned back against the rock, his hat low, the firelight cutting sharp lines across his face. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I can't," he said. "Not while he's out there." She studied him. "Boone's not just hunting you, is he?" He hesitated. The fire popped. "No, Boone's hunting what he lost, his pride. I used to ride with him years ago, before the badge." Elara's breath caught. "You were a deputy?" "For about a minute and a half," he said. "Long enough to see the difference between justice and revenge." She frowned. "What happened?" "Same thing that always happens when a man thinks he can save a rotten system from itself," Rafe said. "Boone set me up to take the fall. When I ran, he got his story, and I got my scars." He pushed up his sleeve, revealing a thin, jagged line near his shoulder, pale against tanned skin. "Bullet from his rifle," he said quietly. "He wanted me dead before the law could hear my side." Elara reached out without thinking, tracing the edge of the scar with her fingertips. His skin was warm, the muscle beneath tense but still. "You shouldn't have to carry that alone," she whispered. He looked at her hand on his arm. "I've carried worse. But this—" He stopped, the words catching somewhere between confession and fear. "This is different." She met his gaze. "Then let me carry part of it." Something in him broke then, softly, quietly. He reached for her hand, brought it to his lips, kissed the inside of her wrist. The touch was slow, reverent, full of all the words he'd never learned to say. "Elara," he murmured, her name a prayer. She moved closer, the firelight painting their faces in gold and shadow. Her breath trembled as his fingers found her jaw, tracing down to her throat, then lower, to the edge of her collarbone. He stopped, searching her eyes. "Tell me to stop," he said, "and I will." She didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Don't you dare." The words were enough. He kissed her, soft at first, then deeper, fiercer, as if every mile of desert between them and the rest of the world had vanished. Her hands slid up his chest, finding the steady thrum of his heart beneath the dirt and fabric. It beat hard, wild, alive. The fire cracked louder, sending sparks into the cold night. He lifted her gently, his coat falling around them both like a shelter. Every movement was careful, not because he feared breaking her, but because he feared breaking this, the rarest thing a man like him could ever touch: peace. Outside, the wind swept through the canyon, singing low. The earth felt older, the stars closer. For the first time in years, Rafe forgot what it meant to run. When the quiet came, they lay side by side, breath mingling with the smoke. The night air was cold, but their warmth filled it easily. Elara turned her head, her voice soft and raw. "What happens now?" He smiled faintly, eyes on the dark sky. "Now we live with what we've done." "And what have we done?" He looked at her, the firelight catching in his eyes. "Found something worth dying for." She reached over, tracing a line down his chest. "Then promise me you'll live for it instead." He closed his eyes, her words sinking deep. "I'll try." Silence again, but a different kind this time. Peaceful, whole. The storm was far behind them now. When dawn came, it touched their faces with soft gold. Rafe was already awake, his hat pulled low, his hand resting lightly on the revolver beside him. Elara stirred, eyes heavy with sleep. "You're watching for him again." "Boone doesn't quit," Rafe said. "Neither can I." She rose, brushed the dust from her skirt. "Then we ride at first light." He nodded. "East, through the ridge. After that, maybe the border." "And after that?" He looked at her and smiled, tired but sure. "After that, we stop running, one way or another." Elara took his hand, their fingers locking together. The warmth of his palm was all the promise she needed. They packed what little they had and saddled the roan. The morning wind carried a whisper down the canyon, distant, faint, but familiar. Hoofbeats. Rafe's jaw tightened. "He's found us." Elara swung up behind him. "Then he rides into his own ending." The roan lunged forward, hooves striking sparks from the stone. The canyon walls echoed their flight, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. They didn't look back. Not yet, because some stories, like some loves, can only be faced head-on. Stay close to the embers, listener. Dawn may bring light, but in the west, light always casts a shadow. The chase began before the sun cleared the ridge. Dust rose behind them in wild spirals, the sound of hooves pounding like war drums against the canyon floor. The roan stretched itself thin, every stride a prayer against the wind. Elara clung to Rafe's back, her cheek pressed against his coat. The world blurred, stone, light, motion. She could taste fear, but it wasn't for herself anymore. "Rafe!" she shouted over the wind. "You can't outrun him forever!" He turned his head just enough for her to see the grim smile tugging at his mouth. "Ain't planning to." Just need a place to finish it." They broke free of the canyon and into open desert. The sky spread wide and merciless, the kind of blue that didn't forgive sins, but remembered them. Ahead, the land tilted upward into a ridge cut sharp against the horizon. He guided the roan toward it. "Hold tight," he said. "We make that ridge. We've got cover." Behind them, Boone's voice carried faint but clear, cruel as a promise. "You run, Calder. I'll bury you in your own dust." Rafe didn't answer. He drove the horse harder. By the time they reached the ridge, the sun had found them. Heat shimmered off the rock. Rafe pulled the roan into a narrow ravine, a dry riverbed twisting through stone like a scar. They dismounted fast. The horse blew hard, foam on its neck. Rafe ran a hand along its mane, whispering something quiet and low, the kind of prayer men say only to their horses or their ghosts. Elara caught her breath. "What now?" He checked his revolver. "Now we end it." "You mean you end it?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "You've done enough. I'm not leaving you." The firmness in her voice stopped him. He'd seen her brave before, but never like this. She stood tall in the hard light, hair loose from the wind, eyes fierce enough to shame heaven. He nodded once. "All right. Then we stand together." The hoofbeats drew closer. They echoed along the canyon, turning the narrow pass into a drum of inevitability. Rafe positioned himself behind a rock outcrop. "They'll come through the mouth of the ravine. Boone'll be first. He always leads when he smells blood." Elara crouched beside him, loading her father's revolver. "Then let him smell his own." For a long moment they waited. Only the wind moved, whispering through dry grass. Then came the sound. 3 riders, maybe 4, Boone's men. The first appeared around the bend, rifle raised. Rafe fired once, clean. The man fell from the saddle without a cry. The others ducked for cover. The exchange began, bullets sparking off stone, dirt leaping, echoes swallowing echoes. Elara fired twice, the recoil jarring her shoulder. She hit one rider's arm, saw him fall back, cursing. Then Boone's voice again, closer now. "You think you can hide behind a woman, Calder? That what she is to you, another body between you and the noose?" Rafe's jaw locked. He rose from cover long enough to fire back. "You always did talk too much, Boone." The bullet grazed Boone's hat, knocking it clean off. The older man laughed, low and bitter. "Still can't finish a thing, can you?" The gunfight dragged on, the sun climbing higher, burning the world gold and red. Rafe's revolver clicked empty. He cursed, reloading. Boone saw his chance and charged, boots pounding, rifle aimed square. Rafe turned too slow. The shot rang out. He staggered, dropped to one knee. "Rafe!" Elara screamed, firing wild. Boone dove for cover, laughing. Blood spread dark across Rafe's side. He pressed a hand to it, breath coming shallow. "Just a graze," he lied again. She tore a strip from her sleeve, pressing it against the wound. "Don't you dare die here," she whispered. He tried to smile. "Wouldn't dream of it." Boone's shadow fell across the ridge. He stepped into view, rifle trained on them both. "Looks like the story ends where it began," he said. "You and me, desert and dust." Rafe struggled to stand, revolver shaking in his hand. "You want me, Boone. You got me. Let her go." Boone sneered. "After she made a fool of me in front of half the county, she'll hang beside you." Elara rose before Rafe could stop her, gun leveled, eyes bright with fury. "You don't get to write this ending." Boone aimed for her chest. Rafe moved first. The shot cracked across the desert. Boone stumbled, shock freezing his face. He looked down, saw blood blooming under his ribs. His rifle fell from his hands. Elara still held her revolver, arms trembling. Smoke curled from the barrel. Boone fell to his knees. You won't get far," he rasped. "The law don't forget." She stepped closer, voice calm and clear. "Then it'll have to chase us through heaven." He dropped to the ground and didn't move again. For a long time there was no sound but the wind. Rafe slumped against the rock, his breath ragged. Elara ran to him, her hands stained with blood and dust. "It's over," she whispered. "You're free." He shook his head faintly. "No one's ever free out here, Elara. We just get a few good miles." She held his face between her palms. "Then let's take every mile left." He managed a smile. "That's the first promise I ever wanted to keep." The sky stretched endless above them, blue, bright and cruel. Somewhere a hawk circled, its shadow cutting across the stone like an omen turned blessing. Elara helped him to his feet. He leaned heavy on her, but he stood. Together they looked down at Boone's still form, the badge glinting faintly beside him. Rafe's voice came quiet. "He died for the same thing that made me run, pride." She touched his arm. "Then don't carry it." He nodded slowly. "No, I'll carry you instead." They turned from the ridge. The desert waited, endless and open. Behind them the past lay still. Ahead the horizon shimmered with heat and maybe, just maybe, hope. They mounted the roan again, the horse weary but willing. Elara wrapped her arms around him. "Where to now?" "South," he said, "toward the border, toward whatever peace we can steal." She rested her head against his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. "Then let's ride before the sun forgets us." He clicked the reins, and they moved. The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and dust, the mingled promise of freedom and danger. And somewhere behind them, the desert closed its mouth over the sound of Boone's name. Stay close, listener. The horizon is near, but love, like the West, never gives up its heart without one final test. The sun was high by the time they crossed the last ridge. Below them stretched a valley of gold grass and silver light, the kind of land that looked untouched by law or memory. The border lay somewhere beyond it, marked not by fences, but by silence, the kind that only freedom knows. Rafe reined in the roan at the crest. His breath came shallow, his shirt dark with blood, but his eyes held a quiet that wasn't pain anymore. Elara slid down, her boots sinking into the soft earth. "You need rest," she said. He shook his head. "Just a minute to look." The wind carried the scent of wild sage and far-off rain. He gazed out at the valley, lips curved in something between a smile and a farewell. "Didn't think I'd ever see this far," he said. Elara touched his arm. "Then keep looking. We ain't done yet." He turned to her, eyes tired but warm. "You still call it we, after everything?" "Especially after everything," she said. For a moment the weight of the world eased. He took her hand and kissed it, slow, lingering, as if tasting something holy. "You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost," he murmured. "What's that?" she asked. "Belief." They led the roan down the slope. The grass brushed their legs, whispering secrets of older wanderers. The world around them pulsed with life, crickets, wind, the steady rhythm of hooves. By the time they reached the stream that cut through the valley, Rafe's strength was fading. He knelt to drink, the water trembling with his reflection. Elara crouched beside him. "We can stop here a while," she said. He looked up at her, smiled faintly. "If I stop too long, I might never get back up." "Then I'll stay right here with you." He sat back against a boulder, hat tipped low, one hand pressed against his side. The bleeding had slowed, but his skin was pale. She reached into the saddlebag, tore another strip of cloth, and rewrapped the wound. Her hands worked gentle, steady, full of care that words could never match. When she finished, he caught her wrist. "You saved me again." She smiled softly. "No. You just finally let somebody try." He laughed once, the sound small but full of warmth. Then he looked out at the valley again. "You ever think about what comes after this?" "After what?" "After running. After fighting. After the dust." She followed his gaze. The wind moved through the grass in long, rippling waves. "Maybe a small house," she said. "A porch that faces sunrise. Horses near enough to hear. A place where the world gets quiet." He nodded. "Sounds like heaven." "You think men like us get that?" He looked at her. "I think maybe we already found it." The light began to soften, gold turning to amber. Rafe reached for her hand again, his thumb tracing slow circles against her palm. "You were the one thing I never expected out here," he said. "The one thing I didn't know I'd been riding toward." Elara leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "And you were the one thing I didn't know I'd been waiting for." They stayed like that for a while, the silence between them deep and easy, the kind that doesn't ask questions because it already knows the answers. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "If tomorrow comes, and we're still breathing, I'll build that porch. You'll paint the door red, just to spite the dust." She smiled through tears. "And if tomorrow don't come?" He met her eyes, steady and sure. "Then this moment's enough." The wind rose again, carrying the scent of rain. Far off, thunder rumbled, soft, distant, forgiving. Rafe's head tilted back against the rock, eyes half closed. "Storm's moving in," he said. "Then let it come," she whispered. "We've outrun worse." He exhaled, slow and peaceful. His hand stayed in hers, his fingers still warm. For a heartbeat, the world held still. The sky, the grass, the stream, all of it waiting. Then he opened his eyes again, and there was life there still. "Looks like we made it," he said. She smiled through the ache in her throat. "Yeah, we did." They sat together beneath the wide western sky as the first drops of rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, alive. And when the thunder finally broke, it didn't sound like danger anymore. It sounded like home. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, let its fire keep burning. Like, share, or leave a word beneath the western sky, so these western stories keep riding on for you.